All right, it looks like we are live. How's it feel, Thomas?
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I'm really looking forward to putting ERDI out there. I've been in 5, maybe 6 meetings today. I started at 3 a.m. I think this is the one that I've been looking forward to the most for the day. I get to talk about a topic that I'm pretty excited about.
I couldn't agree more.
When they asked me if I wanted to do this, I was hesitant. But then I thought of Sean, and I was like, oh, I can do better than Sean. I can beat his numbers. Mark beat me to it, though, so now we've got to beat Mark's numbers.
So either way, though, we got to beat Sean.
Right, either way, we got to beat Sean.
But those numbers are little, right? Tiny numbers.
Yeah, just tiny. We've got Big Sean and Little Sean, and his numbers are small.
Yep.
So, awesome. So, anyways, let's get the show rolling. Hello, everyone. I don't know how many people are actually viewing right now, but welcome to the show. As I mentioned when I shared it, 2 public safety divers trying to keep things clean. I don't know which of us is going to get kicked out first, Thomas. Brittany's moderating this thing, and I don't know, with my military background, I have trouble finishing sentences without swearing. So I'm just waiting for that ban hammer to come down.
Well, I think the reality, though, is then it's just one of us talking to ourselves, which is pretty normal. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Alan Kale, and I work in the business development department at ITI headquarters. I am a public safety diver. I've been public safety diving since 2007. Originally I was a volunteer with the Sheriff's Department. I've moved on to another team since moving to Florida, and public safety diving is my passion. You don't do it because you enjoy it, but I get a great sense of satisfaction out of it. I don't know about you, Thomas, but that's just kind of my general feelings about public safety diving. Going out there and doing things for, potentially families, collecting the evidence for departments, that just every single aspect of public safety diving, you're not doing it for yourself. It's a really selfless occupation.
I couldn't agree more. I think you have to. I think anybody that's on here that does it, or any of us that talk about it or whatnot, I think we all realize that public safety in general is taxing. It's difficult. It's hard work. It's stressful. And you've got to want to be there for one reason or another, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think that the reality is the vast majority of the men and women that take on those objectives at the worst times of day and the worst time of year, and go through all the training and the blackout work and the everything we teach is bad in open water that they go do freely. I think that, they deserve a lot of help and a lot of praise and a lot of support. Anytime you can toss it their way. And I think that's what brings us both here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the people out there? I know that you and we interact pretty much day to day, but there are probably some people on here that don't know you or me.
So I am Thomas Bow. I teach through international training through all the agencies. I have been a public safety diver since, I don't know, it's been a while. It's been 2009, I think. I've been teaching a lot of it since a few years after that. But just like you, I have some time in the Army prior to playing in the dive world. I worked in South Florida for a while. I own Scuba in North Carolina, as well as I'm partnered with some other instructors down in Stewart Scuba and with the Scuba Partners program down there. But been there and done that, but obviously not the best at everything. So that's me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I want to get right into this. I want to get, started talking about, we're going to be talking about training, gear, long-term planning. And I think that, on everyone's mind right now with COVID-19 going on, we want to get to training. Departments want to get out there. They want to train. They've been looking for ways to do so. What would you say that you have done starting out, with these quarantine procedures? What have you done in order to keep training?
So I think one of the biggest things is we have to recognize right now that a lot of locations, a lot of cities, counties, municipalities, even the college systems, they're all but shut down. And even if we're reopening, or your territory is starting to open its doors and let things happen again, things are being rescheduled. People are trying to dig through schedules, etc. And so one of the biggest things that I've been watching lately is going way outside the box. So I'll toot his horn a little bit. Another IT for international training, Daryl Adams, and then another one, Sean Haynes. They've both been sending out things like knot tying apps to public safety divers and passing along information that they've learned in things like the fire service that apply back to public safety. So even if they're sitting at home, they can communicate with their divers who are also at home, but they can walk through, hey, here's what this knot is used for. Tie it for me. Let me watch you do it on video, etc. And then move on to the next one. And the other thing is just Con Ed in general. You've seen tons of people offering things like what we're doing right now, but it'll be an awareness level course. Mm-hmm. Learning how to be a tender, learning how to communicate better, etc. But what we're seeing is people jumping on board with something, because the ability to go out and work as a team may not be available right now unless it's a real call. But to stay on top of things, it's really what can we do, what's within our current regulations, depending on where we are, and then what's out there and available. And so I've seen quite a bit come out here recently, but it just depends on where people are located.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that you mentioned, the sending the knot tying apps and having someone show you how to tie it. We're taking advantage of the technology like we are now in order to get together, even though, you're in North Carolina, I'm in Florida, we're taking advantage of it. And it almost takes me right back to when I was a volunteer with the Sheriff's Department, in the fact that I learned from an experienced member of the team. It was almost like a mentorship, where this individual had a lot of experience. They'd been on the job for years, and I was essentially shadowing them, learning everything that they had to know. And the fact that now we're I almost feel like we're going back to that, in that you're sending these apps, you're showing how to tie knots, all of that, where you may not be able to get together, but you're still able to pass along that knowledge.
Oh yeah. Like I think one of the biggest things people have to remember is, that's where public safety diving came from. Mm-hmm. It comes from the guy who sort of knew what he was doing and could help with an investigation or a rescue or a recovery or something, and so he took this little bit of skill set he might have had in the recreational military world, and then pushed it over into, let's just say, the fire service or law enforcement to help out one day. And then all of a sudden, well, that's a resource. Well, then after a short while, the next kid comes along and he gets taught, and it becomes this growing process of the guy who did teaches the new guy who does. And over the years, we've sort of gotten away from that in many different ways. But what's really cool is, if you've been watching social media, if you've been watching all the shares and whatnot, people all over the country are sharing, hey, here's what I'm doing today. Jump on board. A lot of it is free of charge right now. It's a lot of people just trying to help people either stay current or move forward the best they can during a bad time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's incredible how many people are, offering this up for free. As you said, I think it really goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, how public safety diving is not enjoyable. You do it for a reason. You do it because it's something that you want to do to give back. And I'm seeing that exactly like you're saying, with people just donating their time. Hey, hop on my webinar. I'm going to be talking about this topic. Or, asking individuals from all over to chat in on existing webinars. You're putting all this knowledge out there that maybe we wouldn't have had access to before. Kind of the silver lining to COVID-19 is, the increased communication that's going on, that people may have not been as free with this information prior to us all kind of being stuck indoors. We're social individuals. So, now people are really going out there and putting that information online and making it accessible to everyone.
But I think it opens a doorway too. So we're seeing a lot of people doing this kind of stuff, and what they're doing, I mean, let's be really honest, there's a lot of front ends being offered right now. So here's a taste of it, but now they've got to go out and they got to finish it. So as things ease up and the world opens back up, and especially on the public safety side, because I mean, that job never ends, we're going to have lots of course needs. We're going to have lots of teams looking for wet work. We're going to need academic work where we're sitting together and actually showing practical activities. But bigger than that, it's outside of diving. You've got, like, using knots as an example, you know, you've got things like OSFM courses. You have different groups in different states who teach classes right now that are applicable, that are out there and available, but they've never really been thought about until everybody was stuck at home. And so the opportunity is open in the training environment now for a lot of these teams to realize, oh man, that online work I did really taught me why I need to know strengths of different materials, or why I use a certain knot for something, where historically they've just used what worked on the fly. And so now what we hopefully will see is many more teams or individual divers, however it works out, seeking even greater education just to improve safety, as teams are out in the field or are looking for training in the next year or two. And hopefully it'll also make a lot of pros who teach those things as well as diving realize that not only is there a market for it, but there's a need for it, and there's people out there willing to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going off of that, I think it's really great because people are seeking that information more than previously. I think it's very easy to get into the habit of, in my case, we would show up to our dive rescue facility. We would have our training event, and it was very, closed in that it was our instructor, talking to us, and the material was going to be what he put out. Versus now, it's like you're looking for things to do. These dive teams that maybe can't get together right now, they're going out, they're getting on the internet, they're getting on Facebook. There's several public safety groups out there that I'm a member of where people are just asking for advice. What can we talk about for our meeting, our Zoom meeting, or our Google Hangouts, whatever platform they're using. People are seeking that information. And there's no shortage of instructors, other dive team members putting that information out there and saying, hey, check this out. Have you ever trained on this? Have you checked out this app? Whatever it may be, that information sharing is just skyrocketing. And it's my hope that as soon as we get out of quarantine, that doesn't stop.
So one of the big things that you and I talked about yesterday that I think a lot of people need to use during their downtime, and I really say this for anybody watching, is this is kind of like the dead of winter. So some teams love to get out and train in the cold. The vast majority of teams avoid the cold and freezing water as much as possible, and no matter what anybody wants to say. But now is the time to start looking for that wintertime stuff. And what I mean there is how many times have teams really taken a day to go strip that fucking trailer and clean it out? And I mean everything from sweeping it to restoring, repacking, all the way to pulling team SOPs, SOGs, and sitting down either as a leadership group or as the entire team and look at what's on paper, what you've all agreed to, and how realistic it is moving forward. So, is this a document that was created for a team 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Or does this actually apply to what we do today? And I think many teams fall back on it and say, well, it's done, the board approved it, whatever. But if they really went back and read through it, they would realize we aren't what we were. And we're either a totally different type of response unit now, or we've lost some ability, or we've gained some ability that needs to be documented, and something needs to be put down just to establish a protocol for how you handle yourself. And that is a perfect thing to do, even like we're doing now, where you get remote and you come up with your ideas, and then you conference in and really walk through it and come up with a good thing to take back to the powers that be that might better serve you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's great you brought up those SOPs and SOGs, in the fact that now is kind of the time to look at those when you can't get together. You can't train together. Like, let's focus on the paperwork side of things. I know when I joined my team back before I moved to Florida, we went through it and everyone signed it. We all had files, but then, I can't tell you the last time I really looked at it. So it's good to go over that paperwork. And as you mentioned, how has the team changed? When you signed that document, was it 5 years ago when we were doing a lot of these type of calls, but now we're doing more of these type of calls, the A and B difference. I think it would be good for us to talk, we were talking a little bit about it yesterday about what type of team you are. Are you the team that, is kind of the general purpose team, you can respond to all types of calls? Or are you the general purpose team that you say you can respond to all calls, but when's the last time you've done a swiftwater rescue or even swiftwater training?
But I think that's one of the biggest topics, and it all comes down to liability too. So, I mean, if we have to look at public safety diving as training and regimented planning and things come out of liability and a litigious society, we also need to look at the fact that everything as finite as what we call ourselves might be critical. So how many times do you see a team out there that is, rescue and recovery or, dive in swiftwater or whatever? And then you have to really look at it and say, okay, well, are we swiftwater trained? And you might have a couple guys still, or the team might be trained, but does it meet your state's requirement to be able to fall into that category? Has that material since been updated and nobody's been involved in any of that Con Ed training that needs to be put into play as a follow-up? And then at the same time, when you're looking at those documents, I mean, hey, do we need to take a step back and say, well, we're no longer a team that does this over here? Now, that doesn't mean you can't get there. And then bigger than that, it doesn't mean you don't go to the kids across town and say, hey, this is no longer in our purview, but how can we work out a deal where we now establish some form of mutual aid so that we take care of our community? Because that's the bigger goal. And what I've discovered, because like everybody else that teaches in this community, when I first started out, I was the greedy little kid like everybody else. I did not want to share. I wanted to keep all my resources and make all the money. And I realized really quickly that you don't. And it was instructors like Daryl Adams that I talked about that really showed me that the more we work together and the more we share the overall pie, we get a little bit of everything. And then what you start to realize is when you see calls taking place that involve these teams, they're talking, they're reaching out to each other. They're saying, hey, you have this piece of equipment that I need over here. And there's no question anymore. They've trained together. They've worked together. They're now getting ready to respond to a scene if need be. Literally last night, after you and I talked yesterday, we had a local department here that took a call for a missing child, and we had another team that had just been watching it take place and already had divers moving to the vehicles and everything else and getting ready to respond if they were asked to come and help. And so it just shows you that all of a sudden, rather than becoming a contest or a fight, the effort to now come together and figure out how to help each other with resources and capabilities magically open this doorway where you have this cushion of support that's readily available, and you're not asking them to. That's how they now behave. And, I think that's one of the biggest factors that teams and educators and leadership more than anything needs to recognize, that you don't carry that whole backpack yourself. You divvy up the product and everybody carries it together, and that may include other departments and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about that for a little bit. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of the same way as you mentioned with I want to hoard everything. I want to be good at everything. I want to be the guy. But on my old team, we had the saying about the diver. Everyone wants to be the diver because the diver is pictured as the guy, the quote unquote hero. But really, on our team, we called him the dope on the rope. He was the guy that was he happened to be at the end of the rope. It's a team effort. And, I think I see this a lot. I'm sure you see it a lot, where talking about mutual aid and no one wants to give up control. I can't tell you the number of times I've sat, just waiting on a scene while we were figuring out who was going to be in charge, because everyone wants to be in charge. Everyone wants to do it. But really, it would have been so much more efficient. We would have gotten the job done faster, whatever it may be, to have just had those existing, relationships built and work together on it. Maybe one team's good at this, the other team's good at this, having police and fire on scene, having the paramedic, everyone's good at something.
I think one of the biggest things there is exactly what you're talking about. It's not just dive team A and dive team B. It expands into public safety in general. So for instance, if I have an in-service training day, and I don't care what kind of department you are, one of the things we talked about yesterday, like, why would you not call an ambulance out to your training site? Plan ahead, make sure EMS can handle that kind of thing. But let's look at the reality of that. EMS gets time and numbers for that vehicle being out and doing something. You now have paramedics who respond to scenes in that area on site, working with divers, watching what they do, able to do pre and post checks. If they've never done dive related stuff, it's their time to figure out their questions, to follow up with other medical professionals, whatever it needs to take place so that they're better prepared for real scenes. Take it a step further. So if we're always going to assume that we're diving in contaminated water, unless we know otherwise, why not call out brush trucks, different fire departments in your territory, see if they'll send a couple guys out that'll help every diver get deconned when they come out, walk through it, find out what resources that they're going to have available at their department, versus what you might keep on your dive truck or trailer, and then come up with a process using the resources that are local so that it's quicker, it's easier, and it's practiced. And we're not figuring it out on scene somewhere on the worst of days. Even law enforcement, seeing if different departments might send somebody out to secure a scene for you or walk you through their methodology for how they typically do it, and you're not trying to tell them what to do as a dive team guy. And the best part of that is realizing that lets dive team guys do dive team stuff. Even if they're, let's say they're a sheriff's deputy and the sheriff's department's going to help with scene security. Well, they're not pulling scene security that day. They are dive team guy. But it lets them now get other department people to come out and do that job that they need done while this diver who's training can get in the water or be a tender or whatever it needs to be. But then it's so much easier when the next day comes and a real call comes out and things are faster, things are well oiled. And like everything else, we're still going to have problems, but it's that little basic stuff that you just push out of the way because now you've got a big support structure full of local people. And what I've discovered more than anything else is all of a sudden you have a bunch of new first responders who absolutely want to learn about scuba diving. And the cool thing is that can even start with ERDI. It can start with the awareness level stuff. Another thing we've talked about is everything from dispatchers and 911 all the way over into, paramedics, learning how to be a tender in a worst case scenario, or learning how to just sitting through the classroom academics or the online coursework or whatever, so that dispatcher understands the communications better or understands, hey, it's a dive call. I'm going to go ahead and call the fire department and send a brush truck out. Things like that, so that you're not having to nitpick as a dive team command structure. All these people are well oiled and understand how to best help, which is the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that working together is the only way that we get better. You mentioning about the awareness level. I came from a team, like I mentioned earlier, where I learned from someone. I didn't go through an ERDI program until I actually came to work for headquarters. And then I had my opportunity to go through ERD1. And it really showed me, I wrote an article about this actually. It showed me that I knew a lot. I knew a lot of the concepts, but at the same time, it showed me where I was lacking. It showed me the gaps in my knowledge that just came from not necessarily a lack of training, but a lack of standardized training, where we had our topics that we would cover at our meetings, and I was very knowledgeable on them. But maybe, I needed to brush up on, OSHA and NFPA and things like that. And to have your dispatchers, I'm going to pick them out of everything you just said. Just having your dispatchers knowing what resources to call on. I think that is the huge benefit of the ERDI system, in that you can send your dispatchers a code and they can get, the bare bones basic knowledge of ERDI operations and know, okay, I need to spin up, this dive team. I need the police on station to, set the perimeter. I need the firefighters to do decon. It gives them that knowledge.
Oh yeah. Like, one of the biggest things that I think people really, really, really need to understand is education never ends. And the bigger reality is, just because we learned something today doesn't mean we can't learn the same thing a different way tomorrow. Or better than that, you can't take everything to the next step and keep pushing and driving forward. And one of the biggest problems that I see out there today is exactly what you're talking about. And honestly, it's a military concept. It's that whole, I'm going to send this guy off to a school and then he's going to come back and he's going to train his squad or train, his company or whatever. And the reality is that works great on the front end. That's a great starting point, but it's got to keep going, because every time we share knowledge and it rolls downhill, something's going to be lost in transition. One of the greatest things that I've experienced is team teaching. And it's when I put 5 ERDI instructors in one room with a dive team and they're all helping out. You'll hit different topics, even especially during academics, where you got 9 different approaches getting taught for one thing. But the cool thing is it gives teams the opportunity to hear ideas, hear sensible commentary based on experience, and then pick and choose what works for them and try stuff out when they train or when they do things. But it goes even a step further. And all of a sudden you have students in the classroom who hear 2 or 3 ideas and they're like, wait. What if we do this? And they propose something nobody's ever thought of, combining ideas. And it's the greatest idea you've ever heard of. And all of a sudden you realize, man, I'm learning from my student today. Or everyone in the room just learned from a student. And that's the critical factor. It's, you have a lot of people who hit these hard stop points and they don't want to continue with education and training. And then what that eventually leads to is a dive team with one guy who is 55, 60 years old, and he is the dive team. And you've got a whole bunch of people in t-shirts that hang out with him that are supposed to be on the dive team, because there was a hard stop point, and now it's the old guy who bears the load. And it shouldn't be that way. Like, even look at the modern world where people have a bad habit of assigning tenders as non-divers. If we look at the training material, the reality is the tender should be far more experienced than the diver. The tender should know how to do the job and then control the job from the surface. And that gets lost in translation quite often. But I think, honestly, let's be really, really truthful. We've kind of reset the nation, so to speak. So there's a good chance people can come out of this shutdown in a really good light, realizing where their problems are and, what they need to fix. And they've got all the opportunity in the world to move forward and fix it as they come back into a working environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I got asked to participate in a presentation last night, just to be a student. They just wanted some bodies in the room. And I definitely learned some things from this individual's teaching style. I can't tell you the number of things I've learned and then forgotten over the years. So like you said, people learning and then that's it. That's not it. You're always learning, even if it's something that you potentially previously already knew. I can remember when I tried to become a dive master, I had to reteach myself dive tables because I just hadn't used them in so long. It was gone. So, there's things like that. But one of the coolest things about coming out of this was not only learning a new way to do things, but when I left, I didn't realize it, but everyone in the call was part of a public safety team. And they had actually taken advantage of the free ERDI codes that we're giving away to dive teams. They called us up, asked for some codes, and we got them to them so they could continue their training, even though they're quarantined. And they would not let me leave the call without thanking me. They were really appreciative of the fact that we were making it available. You could hear the emotion of how thankful they were that we were doing something to give back to them. These are people that give back to their communities every single time they go on a call. And, we definitely wanted to do that. And it was kind of an emotional moment for me. I'm the guy that, like you said, the military service, I don't know how to react when someone thanks me for my service, because It's just not how I am. But it was really, it hit me just, you know, them being so thankful for something that was so simple for us.
Well, the other thing that people need to realize too is how hard some of these people work. And I don't necessarily mean the diver, because that's pretty obvious, but look at some of these trainers. And so I'll throw an example out here. So here in North Carolina, we actually have a technical rescue dive program now. And a lot of the burden for that program was put on another ERDI pro named Sean Haynes. And think about it this way. You're about to go into a world of super high-end egos and tell them to do job X and to meet this new implemented set of standards, you have to do all this stuff in line. And it's going to leave people who are kind of left out, or they have to do some things to get up to par, whatever. And that's a lot. That's a lot to get those hits from people that want to complain because things have been done the way they were done for so long. But this is the time where all these people have put in all this hard work and they've created a pathway. Doesn't matter what state you're in. So let's just say I'm in a state in the Midwest somewhere, and my state has no technical rescue program for diving, even though NFPA now has a chapter for it. Well, there are people out there. There are people in the system that have created the pathway, and it's just got to be remapped for your state. And the cool factor there is if you start looking at those things, and I don't know how many people watching this have ever actually navigated NFPA. It's kind of like taking paint and throwing it at the wall and then figuring out the best pathway from A to Z. Well, with that, you have all the technical rescue battery, you have water rescue, you got TR dive, and then everything else that's in the technical rescue world. But there is a pathway that doesn't necessarily have to be followed in order, but in order to get your IFSAC numbers and everything else, you do have to accomplish everything in the middle. And so what I think there's time for now too is to realize the pathways that have been created and that you are a team. So let's say I'm a law enforcement team. There's nothing preventing a law enforcement team from going out there and taking, say, a victim transport class or an LZ course or technical ropes classes. And people will look at that and they'll say, well, that's what fire does. Cool. But if I'm going to go put divers in the water, and now I have to worry about, let's say it's a half knot current. I still have moving water. I've got gear. I've got an extra thing that's now stressing me out. So wouldn't it be better if everybody on the team understood how best to set up lines to protect those divers? They understood the hydraulics of the water. They understood how best to move people from point A to point B, prep for victims getting out of there, just so you're not always relying on somebody else to step in. Even if they are, you still know you can help, you can do the best job you can possibly do. And so it goes the other way as well. I mean, there's people worry all the time. I hear from fire departments that they're not trained in evidentiary collection. Most states don't care what kind of department you are. It's just got to be a state recognized entity. And so there's no reason that firefighters can't take evidentiary courses or things on collection, things like that are run through, let's just say, a community college or through the teaching system in that state. And then when the worry comes up or somebody questions it, you have the document you need and you went and got the same education that justifies why you can handle something. And so a lot of those worries and concerns that people have had for so many years, what they need to recognize right now is the resources are out there. They're going to be back in play. And if it's something that they can't do, well, they can. They might need to go take a course or get invested in getting the team where it needs to be. So the other thing on that, and I bring this up because this is a hot topic, being a diver. So Alan, I know you've heard this, that being a public safety diver means that you are an anchor that crawls across the bottom. Let's be really honest. The first thing we are before we become public safety divers are scuba divers. And I can't tell you how many times I've watched guys who are used to wearing SCBAs and now they go to a full face in scuba diving, and you make them go back to a half mask and they panic, and so many little things. Neutral buoyancy. I mean, yeah, you might have to get on the bottom and root around in some nastiness, But why would you not search the top layer first visually if you can? And if you muck it up, you lose that opportunity. So yes, absolutely. Sometimes you're down there rooting around in the mud. Sometimes the water sucks so bad you just can't see. But for those rare times you can, you got to be a diver first. And if you're a diver first and you're practicing those skills during downtime, hitting the pool, doing basic open water skills, then you will be better prepared to deal with problems. You'll understand the gear more efficiently. And sometimes so diving doesn't become work, you just need to go dive and have a good time. We talked about that.
Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday, in the fact that I know divers that will not go out and just dive unless it's a public safety call. That those are the only times they get in the water, whether that be training or a live call. But they never go out on the boat. They never go out, to the quarry. They never go and just dive to dive and practice those basic skills. I mentioned dive tables as my shortcoming when I went to become a dive master, in that I had forgotten how to do it. Well, think about all the skills at the basic level that you learned in your open water course, that if you're not practicing those, that can you proficiently perform those skills when they become necessary?
Right. Like, everything under the sun, including, when you take that and now expand it to a public safety level. So, how often, and this is again to the people out there, how often do your dive team members get in the water with whatever your redundant gas source is, and you drill, switching to it, bailing out, getting out of that full face, using your switch block, et cetera, because you do not want the first time to be when everything goes south on you. And it eats me up on the recreational side and the public safety side when I see people happily carrying the gear that's considered safe, but they've never actually gone and practiced using it. They've never implemented the product, and when all that stress comes out and the worst anxiety they've ever experienced, they forget it's there, or they forget how to use it. And the more people train, it doesn't have to be public safety. It could be a public safety diver who goes off and becomes a cave diver. That's an awesome set of knowledge to pull back in and make you better at using equipment, being safe, etc. And so the more education they can get, and then there's just that more basic drilling of day-to-day type things you're going to use in the public safety environment, it's just going to make divers safer. And it's going to make you trust your team members more when things go south, because they're going to know how to get to you and take care of you, as well as them in reverse knowing, hey, you can handle yourself better because we've drilled and drilled and drilled until we were just tired of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny that you mentioned a public safety diver going through cave training, since that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm actually taking a course with Brian Shreve, and we had a few more dives to go before I was going to graduate, before COVID-19 hit. But exactly like you're saying about, don't let the time that you need it be the first time you practice the skill. Brian took me to Ginny Springs and put me in the Devil's Ear as one of my, not my first dive in the cave, but one of my first with flow, and experiencing that. And I'll tell you, I got my butt handed to me. It was definitely a learning experience. By the time I finally got the line in after I fouled my first one, I hit thirds. It was time to turn around because I got beaten up so badly. It was my first, one of my first experiences with flow. And that was the time to experience it, when I had Brian and another individual, another cave diver, there to watch me, to make sure I didn't get out of my depth. And I actually greatly appreciated the fact that they let me get my butt kicked, because I learned better that way. I learned just how fast it could go south on me. And, I think that for public safety teams, taking that experience right there, get your butt kicked in training. Don't get your butt kicked on a live call.
That's what training's for, man. Like,
yeah.
For me, same category. So like when I did my cave stuff, I realized lines, just learning how to lay lines and how to be safe with them and how to not impede others or create obstacles, etc. And that's what should be taught from day one. And I don't just mean public safety. I mean, hey, I'm going to do a rec course. That's the way to learn. And so when I came back and I started working with dive teams, it became a hip pocket thing for me. So let's say I had a team guy who went and we did a cavern course at some point. So when we had breaks or downtime or we're setting something else up during an ERDI class, I would hand him a reel and be like, hey, take these guys over there, use those picnic tables, start teaching them how to lay lines. And all of a sudden you had lines going all through a gazebo and around picnic tables, but you could go up there and walk through them and all the lines were contiguous. Everything's low and out of the way, etc. And then that's the way they've learned it. It's not a relearning. It's not a fix a problem from the past. It's a, well, this is how you do it, right? And they drive on. And now when you apply that underwater in a public safety scenario, so let's just look at it from something simple. School bus, underwater, whatever. Horrible conditions. You decide you're going to tie off to go inside this vessel, this vehicle, keeping stuff out of the way, not creating entanglements, giving yourself a guideline home. It's a little example, but it's a perfect example of, hey, it's a skill set that might help somebody out. And I think that's what we're talking about here is spot on. It's this much greater bit of knowledge that whether it's individuals or whole teams, all the teams out there today need to build on it and grow. And for me, it's funny. You want to beat the guy across town. You do. You want to be the better dive team. But the way I've always viewed it is I'm better today. Tomorrow he's better. Now I got to do it again. And that's a good version of competition because now you're competing on a level where you're both helping each other build and grow. And it's a joke. It's a laugh between the two of you on one-upping. But when the worst day comes, that other guy, that other team, whatever is good to go to come help your guys out. And that's the most critical part of it.
Yeah. It's just like my rivalry with Josh Norris. He gives me crap for being in the Army. I give him crap right back for being a Marine. But, at the end of the day, we've got each other's backs. It's a friendly rivalry where we're just trying to one-up each other. I've still got to get him back for those business cards he sent me in response to those crayons. But, it's that friendly rivalry. It's not to the point of, the negativity. It's all in good fun. And I think that that's important to keep in mind. Yeah, we've all got these egos that come with the territory where we want to be better than the other guy. But it's not, it should never be a malicious ego. It should be, you take pride in it, but know that there's always going to be someone out there that's better than you. Always. I don't know, even, I respect you a lot for your knowledge base. And Daryl, you've mentioned Daryl so many times. I look to Daryl for a lot of questions on ERDI often because of how often he is going and teaching these courses. But I have no doubt that there's someone out there better than the both of you. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. It's just that's the fact. There are people, and it may not be, and it can even be they're better at this aspect of public safety diving, but maybe not this aspect. But there's always someone out there better than you.
I think that's the best point too. Like we are all the stupid student in some category. And it's the best thing in the world to be the stupid student. Like I love being that guy and getting to go learn something that I didn't know before and screw it up. Like you said, the screw up is the best moment. You never forget it. You laugh about it. It's a joke forever, but your whole dive universe will change the moment you screw something up. And I'll just throw Daryl mightily under the bus. Daryl's been a team captain since 1991. Just to age him out there a little bit.
I was 3 years old.
Yeah, so literally running a team and taking calls. That's impressive. And that's the example. That's one person in a countless many. Like yesterday we were talking about different individuals from all over the planet that have these experience levels. And it's not just one type of public safety. It could be taking all these tech skills or these open water skills or whatever category you want to talk about. And these guys have done real life, live rescues or recoveries, or even, case solving evidentiary recoveries that are dives that are mind blowing. When you see what they put together on the fly, they accomplished it safely. And some of these guys have even created manuals out of it. They've documented exactly how they were safe. I mean, it's mind blowing. And that's just a good example of how much info is out there and how it never really ends. I think that honestly,